Good morning, everybody. Bruchim Habayim. I wanted to talk a little bit about something that took place in synagogue yesterday. This car is a little bit too small. Dafan Placha get hit on their car. Anyway, it was a father and son. You know, the son was above her. You know, a teenager sitting behind me in shul, and they had two siddurim on top of two chumashim. So for those who don't know, sitting on the table there. So to translate for those who are not familiar with the Jewish parlance, so they had two prayer books on top of two Pentateuchs, the first 5 books of the Bible. Basically those are liturgical readings of the Bible that we use. They'll have, usually a Chumash will have the Pentateuch plus the liturgical Haftarah readings and 5 of the smaller books of the writings of the Bible we call the scrolls, the Megillot. But we'll ostensibly say a Bible, right? So 2 prayer books on top of 2 Bibles. So I moved them around as is traditional, put the Bibles on top of the prayer books, put the Chumashim on top of the Siddurim. And I know some people are going to offend it. I call it Chumash a Bible. I'm trying to translate for a wider audience here. So I'm sorry if I offend you, but I'm not going to change the way I try to translate things, even though it's not really the proper translation. First of all, the Bible would be the Tanakh, would be all the books. But that's neither here nor there. And there was a little bit of a discussion about that question. So the Bacher there, he said his Rebbe in Yeshiva, this teenage boy, he said his teacher in the seminary said that it's just a printed book, mass printed. It's not, and he was very medaic to say that it was mass printed and not, because there could be such a thing that an individual printing could have Kedusha Sefer Torah. You're allowed to put a siddur on top of it. It's just a book. So I explained to him, I said, all right, and he does have certain points, what he's saying, and he's right. But just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And if you have, I understand if you have a small prayer book and a big chumash, it will be difficult to put the chumash on top of the prayer book, on top of the siddur. But they're about the same area, length and width. Really no reason to. The Dav could put the siddur on top of the chumash. And I think that's really what I want to bring out here in making this video. Just because you're allowed to do something doesn't mean you should, but sometimes it makes sense, right? Maybe there's a limited amount of space, and you are praying, and you use it, and you have the siddur on top of the chumash, then it makes sense, right? Or like it was said, a smaller siddur on top of a larger chumash. And the truth of the matter is, of course, the siddur contains passages from the chumash. You have the Shema, the Az Yashir, and in the back you have, usually most siddurim have the Monday and Thursday and Shabbos afternoon readings. So it would seem that there's nothing wrong with it, with putting the siddur on top of the chumash. But then the question is, when is the proper time and proper place? And the same thing with a lot of other issues. And I know people criticize me for doing things that maybe you're allowed to do, you don't have to do. And sometimes for shalom bayis, sometimes it's for kiruv, sometimes it's issues related to tzar gidul bonim, and many other reasons to do certain things. Covenant Brias and Darkei Shalom, and many other cheshbonos, why sometimes you do things one way, sometimes you do things another way. So I'm agreeing with this bacher and saying, yeah, you're allowed to do this, and maybe sometimes you should, but not all the time. Just because your Rebbe said you're allowed to put a siddur on top of the chumash, if we're noyeg not to, 99% of the time, it's better to follow the Hanhoga, what's normative, instead the Chumash goes on top of the Nevi'im, and the Nevi'im goes on top of the Ksuvim. Of course, the Halacha only applies to Me'ikar Hadin, to scrolls, and we assume means handwritten scrolls, or hand-printed scrolls perhaps, could have the same din. I pointed out two things. One is that the Taz holds that a printed Sefer Torah has Kedusha of the Sefer Torah. The other thing I pointed out was that in Shanghai, the Brisker Yeshiva, they made brachos on a printed Chumash. So, of course, it's a Yotze Min HaKlal, and it's not how we paskin. It shows that there should be a certain type of a sensitivity to some of these things. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you shouldn't, and there might be reason to say one way or the other. So, this is generally the answer that I have here is, on one hand he's right, on the other hand, maybe the proper thing is, though, nonetheless, to do what we usually do. But again, there are many reasons sometimes to be Yotze Min HaKlal. I remember years ago there was a whole machloikis that President Trump's daughter and son-in-law were Shomrei Torah mitzvahs. They're from Yidden, they're Jews who try their best to keep Torah mitzvahs. Maybe don't live up to 100% all the time, but they do their best. And they were traveling on Shabbos in a plane. They left before Shabbos and they arrived after Shabbos. And someone said, why do they have to do that? Well, they had an important reason to do it. The Korv Lamalchus. Why can't they just do like everyone else? They have a reason. And the truth was, it's just like being on a ship. You're allowed to get on a ship, but generally they were saying it had to be a certain amount of time before or after, but this was different because the way things were. But here, they were able to keep Shabbos on the plane. They weren't doing any malacha. There's really nothing wrong with it. Now, does that mean you and I, we can do that on a regular basis for no good reason? No. But if there is what to rely on for when, and sometimes once in a while. And the thing is that even them having a status from the Korv Lamalchus, if they were doing it l'tzorach atzman, there might be, for their own personal reasons, there might be reason to say no, they can't do it. But this was an important trip, it was to Saudi Arabia or something, and it was for the sake of Shalom, and it was going to, it helped a lot of big things, and it even had the potential to help, whether it did or not. And this, it looks like they were successful in what they were trying to accomplish. So there's a reason there to allow it, but everybody should take these things in the proper stride, in the proper way, and understand sometimes you can do things, sometimes you should or you shouldn't, the same things like this. So I think that was kind of the way I'm looking at these things. Alright, thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment. We'll see you later.